Hello, Chirag. Good morning.
Hi, Myra. Good morning to you. It's afternoon my time now.
Yes. So we'll wait for Nandakumar sir to join and then we will start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Right. Sorry about the confusion. I was trying to join the previous meeting on Google Meet.
No, it's fine. So there are 29 participants. Shall we start? So people will keep on joining.
Sure, we could do that.
Sounds good.
So give me a minute. So good morning all, one and everyone present here. Good afternoon to Chirag sir, because he's situated in Sydney right now. So I, Dr. Mayura, welcome you all on behalf of Legasis to this enthralling panel discussion on exploring the dynamics of regulating AI. The word AI has been a buzzword of the day. Everyone is talking about it, but no one knows what actually consists of. There are attempts to regulate it through legislative machinery across the globe, but do we really need to regulate it? That moot question we are going to discuss today through this panel discussion. All these thoughts actually have prompted us to hold this panel discussion so that through the conversation and to be the meaningful conversation of experts, we can understand the nuances of regulating the AI. For the panel discussion today, we have with us Mr. Nandakumar Sarvade sir, retired IPS officer and former CEO of Rebit, and Mr. Chirag Joshi sir, founder and CEO of 7 Cyber Rules. Before we proceed with the session, I would like to briefly introduce our panel experts. Mr. Nandakumar Sarvade sir is a senior advisor on governance, strategy, ethics, and cybersecurity. Drawing from his impactful stints in government and private sector, spanning for more than 36 years, with expertise across diverse domains of law enforcement, banking, cybersecurity, and technology management, he is a knowledge seeker with action bias. Mr. Sarvade was the founding CEO of Reserve Bank Information Technology Private Limited, that is Rebit. It is a fully owned subsidiary of RBI for technology management and cyber security. He has built a team of 350 strong people, which started from the scratch and transformed a modest government startup into a powerhouse of a nimble technology project execution, world-class cybersecurity operations for protecting RBI's IT assets, technology audit diagnostic for better cybersecurity for Indian banks, and cutting-edge innovation for big data systems. He has contributed as a member of the Amalgam Committee on Divergences in NPAs and Bank Frauds and shaped the IT Vision 2021-24 document for the RBI. He has finished his 5-year tenure as CEO of Rebit way back in May 2021. Sir, before joining to RBI, he was acting as a CEO of Data Security Council of India, where he has played an instrumental role in cybersecurity industry development, policy research, and advocacy. Before joining to the private sector, Sir was acting as a IPS officer, and he has served the post in states of Jammu and Kashmir and West Bengal. He also joined the Central Bureau of Investigation on Deputation in 1996 and worked in Mumbai and Jaipur for 7 years, looking after the Prevention of Corruption Act, investigation of bank frauds, and economic offenses. Sir has been awarded with the Prime Minister's Baton and Revolver for being the best all-round probationer of the 1987 batch of IPS and the Indian Police Medal for Distinguished Services. Sir is a prolific speaker and he is a well-known author. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of Legasis. Now, our next panelist for the day is Mr. Chirag Joshi, sir. He is a seasoned cybersecurity executive with extensive experience of building and leading cybersecurity functions in multiple countries across various industries, including financial services, energy, higher education, and government. Through his work in these large organizations, he has enabled their cybersecurity maturity and consequently contributed to a collective cyber resilience of the sectors. He has experience in both IT and operational technology environments and leading cybersecurity through mergers and acquisitions. Chirag is the author of 2 best-selling books, 7 Rules to Become Exceptional at Cybersecurity and 7 Rules to Influence Behaviors and Win at Cybersecurity Awareness. Through Chirag's podcast series titled as The Art of Cybersecurity, he is collaborating with various industry experts globally to provide valuable insights into the essential aspect of cybersecurity leadership. He is featured in the prestigious CSO 30 2022 list of top 30 cybersecurity executives in Australia. He is also recognized as a finalist for the Australian Cybersecurity Professional of the Year Award in 2022 and 2020. Chirag has worked with several leading industry bodies such as Standards Australia to enable knowledge sharing and quality outcomes. He continues to serve as a board of director for ISACA Sydney, which is a global association of cybersecurity, audit, and risk management professionals with a presence in over 180 countries. As well-known keynote speaker, Chirag continues to exhibit thought leadership in the industry through presenting at numerous events, conferences, forums globally on various topics such as bridging the gap between cybersecurity and businesses, strengthening the human factor in cybersecurity, building effective cyber strategies, and addressing evolving cyber threat and risk landscape. Chirag sir, we welcome you on behalf of Legasis.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So we will proceed with the panel discussion now. I will be moderating the session. So we will start with the introductory remark. I would like to ask inputs or thoughts from Chirag sir that how you will define AI.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you. And very nice to be here with you, Dan Kumarji, on this panel today on an important topic. And a big hello to our audience as well. Thank you for joining us. So look, AI, simply put, is the ability of machines, of technologies to mimic human intelligence, right? These are techniques and approaches to mimic human intelligence. That's how I try to keep it simple. What is human intelligence? Human intelligence refers to our ability to perceive things, to visually look at things, to analyze and critically think about different areas, to feel things too. So these are different human emotions, human decision-making that we want eventually artificial intelligence to start doing. And the idea is it should benefit us as a civilization. However, there are different terms get thrown around when people talk about AI. So maybe it's useful to get an understanding of what these terms are. So one is, artificial intelligence, which is a massive branch. Within that, machine learning has come about, and machine learning has been with us for a long time. But I still see people using these terms interchangeably. Machine learning is one way of realizing artificial intelligence. Machine learning involves essentially making decisions and making predictions without explicit programming. So if you take a very simple example, right? If you program a system to perform basic addition, and if you give it inputs 2 and 2, it should give you 4, explicitly programmed to do it. However, in a very simplified view of what machine learning would be, you train it on a bunch of picture of cats, and you keep telling it it's a cat, it's a cat, it's a cat. Eventually, through its learning, it figures out when you give it a picture, is it a cat or not. Right? You don't have to program it every single time. So it learns from data. And again, I don't want to get too technical here because we have a wide range of stakeholders in our audience, but it's important to realize that machine learning is an aspect of getting there. So are neural networks and deep learning. And these work together to essentially help us in a bunch of ways. And while this is not an abstract concept, it's not some theoretical thing, we all are using AI and have been using AI in our daily lives without even realizing it. So if you've ever used recently your map applications to help navigate, and it's giving you real-time traffic information and making predictions on what the traffic would be, it's likely using AI. If you think about the chatbots that you're interacting with when you are perhaps trying to buy something or engaging with customer service and as a virtual bot, that's AI, because it's using that essentially that learned behavior and answering your questions. When you go on your favorite streaming channel, be it Netflix, be it Amazon, or be it whatever, and you get recommendations that are based on the movies you watch, that's AI at play because it's making those predictions. So is shopping when you go to shop things. So it's everywhere in our consumer life, but it's also in industries. It's helping through autonomous vehicles, through robotics. It is helping in a wide range of applications, be it agriculture, be it healthcare. So you're starting to see massive applications of it, if not already. If you have your smart assistants at home, be it Alexa or one of your other ones, Siri, well, they all are using that. So we are using it, we're living with it, getting the advantage of it as we speak. So it's not a hypothetical. However, with ChatGPT becoming as popular as it did, and a host of applications that correspond to this new generation, as we're talking about, is generative AI, which is simply put an ability to generate new content, be it images, be it text, be it other suggestions based on previously learned behavior and continuously learning models. I think that's where we are now starting to see a next iteration of AI coming in. The fear that comes about as a result of misconceptions around AI is something that we should tackle. I think there is a lot of good that comes from AI, and which is where I want the conversation to be a balanced conversation. We should talk about the risks that come. Yes, absolutely. But there are also benefits to be gleaned from it. So hopefully, Mayura, that helps with kind of framing the conversation on how AI can be defined and how it is used in our day-to-day lives. And we should be clear that what we call as fully self-aware AI or general AI is still not there yet. You still don't have AI that can feel human emotions and can act and feel like humans. You may have seen that in movies, but it's still not there yet. So we're not saying that'll never happen, but it's not there yet. So I think it's important to temper buzzwords and important to temper those expectations and realize what do we have and how do you use it smartly.
That's absolutely correct, sir. Now I would like to have view of Nandakumar sir about how he will like to define AI.
So good morning, everybody. Thanks to Legacies for arranging this. I see this more as a learning exercise for myself than any occasion to propound my expertise, because it's such a new field that I think we all have to grapple with it to understand what it is. And great to have someone like Chirag to explain us the technical innards of how it works. So obviously, there are going to be levels of details which are going to be more and more deep, and it will take probably a lifetime to really understand that. But I would rather approach this discussion from a point of view of I think the topic is very well framed. And I like the word dynamic, because it is so fast morphing into something which it is not yet, that we all need to worry about it a little, because without worry, we don't act. And we also need to then understand how to balance the good side of AI with the risks which come with it. I wouldn't yet call it bad side, because as Chirag said, the artificial general intelligence is not around yet, which will make it, as the movies show, Terminator and Matrix, something which is against humanity itself. But there are significant risks as have been already been identified. So I would rather look at, obviously there are going to be great benefits. And I was reading the Canadian draft bill on regulating AI, and it necessarily talks, Canada has been one of the pioneer countries in AI research historically. And they talk about the good things which can come out of AI applications, things like healthcare improvement. I think the famous story is about how the AI researchers predicted that in 5 years, all the radiologists will lose their jobs, because the machines will become much better at reading the radiological artifacts than the doctors themselves, because of the sheer number of data they are getting exposed to and so on. So I was seeing the interview of the famous researcher, the father of AI, who made that prediction. He said, my prediction was wrong. It is not 5 years, but it is 10 years. But it is going to be there. So job losses are not at the level of coders or entry-level people, but also at the level of very experienced people who are basically leveraging their role as a knowledge worker and their data processing and their experience to see and give outputs which are useful. So healthcare probably definitely is one area where we'll see AI making significant distinctions. The other day, somebody sent me a video, and all of our learning nowadays is through a lot of it through WhatsApp University, because these videos come through the WhatsApp. And there's this video which shows Israeli video where there is a drone which is being used in agricultural harvesting. The drone approaches an apple tree, looks at the possible apples to be picked, chooses the one which is the right apple to be picked at that point of time, leaves the others as on the tree, and look at the combination of visual AI. I mean, how it identifies the right, almost ripe apple, the application to robotics to pick the apple and put it and get it packaged and so on. So I agree, harvesting. So as we know, famously, hunger is going to be a big problem for the world, because we'll be 9 billion people in another couple of decades. And food is going to be a problem. 50% of the food gets wasted before it reaches the table of consumers. And there's a lot of benefit which can come about by a system which kind of does this in a very mindful manner, so to say, and so on. There are very interesting applications like text-to-speech, or even beyond that, where customized education, I mean, it's a dream for a child to have a dedicated teacher, and an AI can really provide that through a robotic interface or otherwise. But to understand a child's abilities, aptitudes, fears, and then provide information or teach, not information per se, but teach in a customized manner. I think these are some of the really advanced visions that one can have. And obviously, as Einstein said, vision is the imagination is much more important than knowledge. And AI enables everybody to dream and provide that benefit to us. But now let me put on my hat of a risk management person or a cop in short, and say, okay, what can go wrong? And what is the possibility that it can go wrong? So there are, I think, various kinds of harms which have already happened. Some of them have already been noticed and researched also. For typically, algorithm biases is something which has been identified. These have been demonstrated in recruitments where the existing biases in a company's policy get encoded into the algorithm, and the algorithm ends up hiring people exactly who are like the current people and discriminates against women, minorities, and so on. Facial recognition has been identified as discriminating against people of color, and so on and so forth. So there are these technologies are already getting deployed for safety, security, and so on when it comes to facial recognition, without understanding the biases which are inherent. And obviously, this whole area of cognitive bias itself is probably a little new one for decision makers to really understand that they will make mistakes. All of us have biases. All of us are open to making wrong assumptions or coming to wrong conclusions. And AI is going to exacerbate that because it is learning from us. So that is one and very clear identified one. But if you hear people like Harari, they talk about how the machines will hack humans, because humans communicate with each other and collaborate with each other and live in a society, and they use the medium of language to talk to each other. And once you have a generative AI, which is going to talk, write poems, create deepfakes, which are videos which are so believable that nobody will disbelieve them, create audio personas which can then converse with other people, making them believe that they are talking to a real human. And there have already been cases, and I deal with cybercrime as part of my interest. And there have been cases where a mother has got a call purportedly from her son, and the voice and the speech and the script is so natural that she ended up transferring money for paying his fees, but it went to a fraudster's account. So these are all happening around us. Obviously, the criminals always move faster because they don't have any regulation guiding what they can do and what they cannot do. But these misuses are going to be there. Today, we have so much of our personal data outside, which is already leaked, or which is not, those who are holding our information are not bothered to keep it, or it is being sold and bought, even worse. And if this information can be tapped into by an AI application, which as Nandakumar Sarvade, with this background, this likes, dislikes, and I'm on social media, so people know what I'm interested in, and they can write very customized messaging to me. I would have said email, but it's no longer email. It can be a WhatsApp call. It can be somebody sending me a video, and they will know exactly which buttons to press to make me anxious, to make me greedy, to make me go beyond normal helpfulness and do things which somebody else wants me to do. So this possibility at individual level is alarming, but at the societal level, it is actually really catastrophic. There have been elections which have been influenced by planting of stories and how those stories get shown on social media platforms. Again, there are algorithms at work, and those algorithms basically work for maximizing the advertising potential, but they can be hacked into. As somebody who understands how people share news, with whom they share news, you can really build narratives which are very powerful and which can transfer power or concentrate power and so on. So these are some of the risks which are there. And then there are going to be adversarial actions. So, I mean, there are nation states who have their interests. There are border disputes. There are commercial competing positions and so on. And all countries are trying to maximize their interests, but they also may end up harming other countries. And they can really use AI to plan, execute these operations in a big way. So there is the last topic I want to touch on in AI arms was the AI-driven autonomous weapons. And that, I think, is the nightmare of everyone. There have been treaties around chemical weapons and biological weapons, and nobody's yet talking about AI autonomous weapons and so on. But this is the landscape. I think I'm giving a very high-level picture, but it's important to understand the whole landscape so that we can then come down and say, okay, I can do something about this, so let me do something about this. So I'll pause here and then I will come back later.
Yes, it's very rightly said by sir that starting from the individual till the nation across the globe, everyone is using the AI, but there are different contours of usage. There are bad effects, there are good effects. So I would like to have views of Chirag that how we can actually harness the benefits from the technological perspective, simultaneously maintaining the balance that it should not be misused from a technological perspective.
Yeah, look, so the thing here is we collectively are, as different countries internationally, trying to come up with what is a good framework, right, for this to operate within. And you're starting to see good frameworks emerge, which are at least now putting some shape around it. So here in Australia, the Australian governments put out ethics, which principles. So these revolve around the human-centered values, human well-being, contestability. So when you feel like AI has made a decision about you, or has said something about or analyzed something about that you want to contest, there explainability. Can you explain? Is it a black box? Who knows what is happening, and who has accountabilities for it? Privacy and data security, of course, is the heart of it, and reliability. So these principles, while not exhaustive, give a good guardrail. So that's Australia. You're starting with something similar. So in the US, if you look at what NIST has done with the AI risk management framework, I encourage everyone to take a look. While you may not be practitioners, and that we don't have to be practitioners in AI to have a look there, because it does lay a good foundation on what is good risk management in this area. So it breaks down into governance, into mapping the context, into measurements, which is such a key bit of everything that we do, and then management. So we always keep saying, right, you can only manage what you can measure, and what gets managed well and measured well, delivered value. So if you want delivery, we also need to measure and manage these things well. So we cannot have black boxes going around that none of us understand. There needs to be accountability over each level of what is being done. So that being said, I am also an advocate of these are guidelines, these are principles. You cannot, if you decide to get too onerous with it, you risk the unleashing the potential of what it could be. Because if you look at credible studies that are coming out, they're forecasting billions of dollars of revenue being added to governments, of being added back to economy on dollars invested in AI. So something which was around $1 invested gives you $10 back. So that is the economic potential that can be unleashed if you do this well. So I think that's where the opportunities and benefits to us lie. Now, if you think about the frameworks, the risk aspect of it, you asked me where we can be smarter about it, right? So if you think from let's put my cybersecurity hat on. Now, there are clear, tangible benefits that have come about because of artificial intelligence. Move beyond the buzzword, right? Forget the buzzword for a second. Everybody claims to be an AI these days, and that's okay. But if you think practical applications in cybersecurity, a big challenge that is in front of teams today, and security operations team who actually look at events, monitor events, respond to cybersecurity threats and incidents, which is such a vital part, right? From nation state to criminals to hackers, like everybody's interested in cybercrime because it's an easier payout than physical crime. Attribution and prosecution is really hard, and the barrier to entry is really low. So I think those result there. But in those areas, security operations analysts, AI can really help them, and it is helping them by doing the first line of work when it's deployed correctly. So for the understood and repeatable processes, it actually does really well of reducing the analyst fatigue, and that can really help. It can also make good predictions on user entity behavior analytics. So what I mean by that is, if a typical user pattern is established, as to Chirag typically deals with this set of data from this location at this time, and that's traditionally his work profile, and if something is dramatically changed from it, and if he's sending emails suddenly from a very different country at a very different time, even if it's my email address, that could bypass your traditional protective gear, because email address is legitimate, there are no missing, there is not a phishing email by the virtue of just the indicators. But artificial intelligence and pattern recognition actually helps you to understand, well, this is not typical pattern for this person, so be alert. So I think this is where we are starting to see some real good innovation already happen. It's not coming down the pipeline, it's here now. There are plenty of examples like that. So that's a benefit. The other benefit that I'm starting to observe with this is the creativity aspect that Nandakumar raised out. I think that's really important because people worry about, and there is reasons to worry about plagiarism and other aspects, right? Like of the human creative work being outsourced to machines. Back in the day, people used to remember people's phone numbers and birthdays, and now they can't function without a phone, right? Like we've outsourced our memory to our smartphones. I'm worried we'll outsource our creativity to chat GPTs and the likes, right? So I think it's important that we use them. These are tools. They're not by themselves solutions. And we need to figure out what problems we are trying to solve with these tools. So with AI, I've seen some good financial institutions thinking ahead and actually deploying it really smartly. So what it can do is it's actually trying to understand your spending patterns, understand when you pay bills, so it can forecast for you what bills to expect when. That can really help someone's cash flow. It can really help a household plan budgets. There are bots out there which can, in agriculture, identify weeds from plants and actually help improve the yield quality. That's there. There is AI being applied to bot communication, which is much more and better than the frustrating experiences a lot of us had with bots where it just doesn't understand. But the human intervention is really key. So there are areas where you want the human to override and be able to influence it. You don't want AI to make decisions on emergency services all by itself and do that and step in, because that's where a human needs to come in and apply that. AI can only go off what it knows. But hey, if you're ordering something on a takeaway food app and AI is involved, and if it makes a mistake, it's not end of the world, right? So I mean, there are areas where you can be smart about these things, but the role of human critical thinking will not be replaced. If anything, to combat disinformation, to combat scams, to combat what people are trying to exploit, is our biases, our inherent emotions. Our critical thinking will really need to step up.
Very true, sir. So, but you have said that whatever we can measure, that only we can manage. So it is really difficult in this digital era to measure the impact of AI on the lives of human beings. So how you will like to have the regulations to be shaped up? Because if we need to have a human interventions, we need to have a regulation. So how it can be done in a better manner so that we can have a balance between good things as well as the bad things?
Is that for me or Nandakumar?
Both of you.
Okay.
You can take it up.
Look, I think from a regulations perspective, I think that's a key thing, right? So think about regulations and when regulations are actually effective. So I'm an advocate for good, sensible regulations. I think we need that as a society. I mean, there is a reason why, our food's regulated, our water's regulated, our financial services are regulated, because it impacts us as individuals, impacts us as human beings, impacts our societies. So something that has a potential to fundamentally transform things, which AI does, to use it smartly, to use it wisely, there is room for regulations. And it should have regulations to the aspect of what I mentioned in terms of the 8 ethic principles that I was talking about earlier. You can take those principles and regulations can start forming around those, right? As Nandakumar had earlier mentioned, rules of engagement is what he was referring to in terms of AI-driven weaponry. But also within it is what is acceptable in terms of AI design, deployment, governance. Which areas do we purposefully do not want to include AI, and why? And that's what I was talking about for emergency services, for nation-state responses. You don't want machine-to-machine combat to start, because in theory it could start, right? Like 2 machines programmed to interact with each other, and the rules trigger an action. But that's where human beings come in with our human-centered values of empathy, of understanding, of negotiation, and actually can diffuse that. So I think you need to have sensibilities around where you introduce legislation. And it shouldn't be it shouldn't be a solution looking for a problem. So try to understand what you are trying to govern with AI. And obviously the impacts to human life make the first logical place to start. But you don't want to stifle innovation in organizations so much so by, owners reporting requirements that just doesn't make sense. And that is where regulations fall apart. When you make it too onerous, you don't consult business, you don't consult the industry, you don't consult impacted parties, and it's just kind of thrown down as an academic exercise or a theoretical exercise without accounting for the cost of complying with it, the benefits that come out of it. And I think that's where we need to be smarter about these things.
Yes, very correct. Nandakumar sir, your take on this?
Yeah, so I would like to draw on our traditional experience of technology deployment. The other day, my mother was speaking to me. She's a old lady now, looking after her farm, and she always thinks of the farm problems. So I get drawn into that discussion. But she was saying that this year there are so many snails in the farm, and it's such a nuisance. I said, how are you going to deal with it? She said there is a spray available, and we'll spray that, and the snails will be taken care of. And then she said, there was a time when I was younger, and there used to be a lot of birds which would eat these snails, and the problem was not there. The first time I'm hearing this kind of thing. I said, the spray that you're going to use for snails, such sprays in the past have killed the birds, and that's why there are no birds. So there's no technology which works only as intended and doesn't go beyond the original mandate. So that is important to keep in mind. Secondly, it is a very important principle to say technology will assist humans improve their productivity. Obviously, there are going to be job losses, which is a separate sociological and economic problem to look at. But those of you who have seen recently the Wimbledon matches, you would see that there are disputed calls where the ball is landing outside the line, on the line inside. And the machines can really tell you what really happened. But the call is with the human. The human will say, yes, he can overrule the machine also. And there's a cost to making that appeal. So it is exercised sparingly. But this is one model. But in the US Open, the same technology, Eagle Eye or whatever it's called, makes a call and actually calls out every ball, whether it's in, out, in real time. There's no human involved there. And that is also a model. And in the interest of fairness, that model looks to be better than getting a human in the loop. Gradually, the ability of humans to process these decisions will go down, because as we know, there was a time when one could remember dozens and 100 phone numbers. Now, there was a famous case of somebody who lost a phone and couldn't even call his partner because he didn't have her number memorized. It was there in the phone. So the ability of humans to really, because humans become lazy, they don't really go to the next level of capability. They fall back to the level of their laziness. So these are some of the things. But let me come back to the problem of whether regulation is required or not. So I think we've seen that regulation is required because this is a new technology with grave implications. So it is required. As somebody famously said, nobody can build a nuclear bomb in the basement, but anybody can build a killer AI application in their basement because the computing abilities required are available on tap and they are not very onerous. So that was so you need to ensure that, wherever the computing is happening under some kind of oversight. The other question is, can one country do it? Now, imagine EU has already got a lot of flack. Italian regulators banned ChatGPT for a month, and somebody actually did a research and said how much it affected the economic output, because it was obviously a constraint which other countries didn't have. And EU is famously known as a place where innovation doesn't happen because there are so many onerous requirements. So there is a competitive mindset when it comes to regulation, and countries will say, let others deal with this. We'll just build what we require in our country and go on with it. So there is an international approach which may be required at some point of time, especially in autonomous weapons area, as we discussed earlier. Now, if it is a global approach, how can it be enforced? You take the famous framework around nuclear weapons. There is a very well-evolved mechanism to keep track of material which can be converted into weapons, and there are inspections, and there are very onerous requirements of keeping records and verifiability, etc. But in AI, how do you really ensure this? This is something which whether you may make regulation, but it may not be enforceable to the level that you want it to be. So that is another issue. There is of course, initiatives are there. OECD has set up the Global Partnership on AI. There are centers of research in Montreal and Paris, which are doing some work around it. But as somebody said, everybody was taken aback by how fast the generative AI came out and then how fast it grew. And now the luxury of making policies over years post facto is gone. We have to really look at, prior regulation. Regulation as things are happening. So the new constructs of regulatory sandbox are also coming in, and they are good. But I worry that regulators' understanding of technology is always much behind that of the entrepreneurs. And regulators end up being very restrictive. And if they don't understand technology, its potential, they can put a lot of unnecessary constraints, which are competitive disadvantage when it comes to a inter-country perspective. So that is something which is a problem. I think one interesting approach which was recommended is the self-regulatory approach, and that you will see in many companies. Already some companies saying that regulate us. The famous statements being made by the big tech CEOs is that regulate us, because then we'll go ahead and within the boundaries laid down by you, we will ensure that things are under control. So I think this is a good approach. So quasi-governmental self-regulatory approach with a very dynamic kind of understanding, faster speed of decision making when it comes to understanding changes and the constraints required to put, regulatory sandboxes, more investment into regulatory capacity. As we see, regulators are severely handicapped by not having the right kind of talent, technology talent in particular. They need to be open about getting people from the industry, lateral hires. There are a lot of things which can be done. I think eventually the frameworks which Chirag mentioned, the NIST framework, risk management, is very well tested and available in various fields. And we need to look at research, self-regulation, testing. Even black box testing is important, because beyond a point, I don't think any algorithm can be explained by even those people who created the algorithm. So that's the way it works in deep learning, right? So, but black box testing will give you most of the regular cases, not the edge cases. And then you can put some boundaries around how the deployments will happen. So I think that is the approach I think will be useful in taking up regulation. I don't think anybody has figured it out, but probably that is the way to go ahead.
Yes, that's appropriate. Like we need to have a self-regulatory mechanism kind of, because from the compliance perspective where we are working, we find it really difficult when the regulations are too strict to be complied with. It actually hampers the growth. It actually hampers the harnessing of the potential of this upcoming technology. So though regulations are needed, but they need to be accommodative. That's what we can say. They need to be flexible. And as Chirag has said it, they need to have the impact analysis done before we actually have the regulation. We need to take into consideration the enterprise, say the voice of industries. So that can be worked out very well. So as we agree, all of us are on the same page that there is a need of a regulation, but what will be the kind of a framework both of you have discussed? So, but the difficulty with respect to the enforcement, on that part, I would like to explore more, like how we can explore it from the technological perspective. Shall we have AI regulating AI, or the human intervention is always needed to regulate the AI? Even if we make the laws, even if we have the enforcement mechanism, can we really regulate it? This is a big question, because we don't know who is creating it. Like, for example, ChatGPT, we extract the data, we don't know whose copyright is it. So that question is coming up right now. We don't have the laws where we can actually get the copyright for the machine-made data. So that is the actual difficulty when we are talking about regulations, though it will be laws, policies, principles. So when the persons are not known, what do you think from the security perspective, best way to fix the accountability for that matter? So Chirag, I would like to have your views from a cybersecurity expert, that you are unable to catch the perpetrator. So whom you will regulate?
Yeah, no, look, it's an interesting one, right? It has multiple aspects to what you're talking about, Mayura, because it's and with these things, we are in a bit of an uncharted waters too, because of just the nature of what we are dealing with. So let's just see what has worked. And what I like are, and I think regulations that work well are principles-based standards and regulations. So they are not super prescriptive, but they lay guardrails within which it's okay to operate. So I think that has to be an approach to something that is moving so dynamically. Now, with regards to accountability, I think you need to start something in cybersecurity which has worked well, right? For the longest time, cybersecurity had an issue of being delegated down to the technical specialist as opposed to being considered a true business risk because of the impact that it has. And now we have seen regulations that are actually working, that have put the onus and responsibility on the board of directors for organizations, the boards, the senior executives. So for organizations, I think that's actually starting because they now are asking the right questions of their technical teams because they are now on the hook for it, right? It's starting all the way at the top. So when you think about the industry aspect of it, my view is the accountability should start at that level in terms of deployment, in terms of the rollout of products, and ensuring that they conform to good principles of development and good principles of non-bias, discrimination, protection of information, because fundamentally those haven't changed, right? We still trust organizations to handle our data smartly. We still trust them to treat us fairly. So I think those human values that we've generated over decades and decades of our existence, I think they need to be reflected into these regulations. So I think first rule, do no harm. So I think you start there, right? You don't do any harm. But this is where you start putting some guardrails around accountabilities. You put guardrails around when we discussed earlier around, the explainability, the transparency. But also, if you remember a few years back, there was a case where a chatbot that Microsoft was trialing, started saying very inappropriate things, right? And we had to take it offline. Now, those things can happen again, right? So I think it's really important that we are not punitive always in our approach, but we set guardrails knowing that there is an aspect of unknown there, but you quickly action. Like in case of a cyber data breach, for example, right? Nobody's saying that there can never be a data breach. That's not reasonable. There will be breaches, but we are now expected to have a tested incident response plan. We're expected to have a defensible cyber risk posture. We're expected to have reporting that in a timely manner notifies individuals of the harm potentially could be to them and fix that harm. So I think these are the things that apply. It's not just bad things would happen, but quickly, how can you respond? Have you tested those processes? Are you doing adequately enough so it's secure by design? And I think the role of quantifiable data for decision-making for risk is such a key thing. In cybersecurity, that's something we're grappling with, is how do you quantify a risk, which is typically an abstract risk, right? It's not a financial risk where you have numbers. You're dealing with a lot of subjectivity here, but there is a way to quantify that. I think the same thing we need to start doing for AI is quantify AI is better, because let's be honest, that's how people react, right? That's how people react to risk. They want to see, is it high, medium, low? What's the benefit? What's the worst case? What are the numbers? What is at stake here? And we'll need a way to do that. And so in the context of our understanding, I think that's what I would suggest we start doing. To your point about copyright, that's going to be a very interesting case, right? So, but ChatGPT is one product. There are other generations where come in, and you're going to be very smart about these things, right? I mean, if you're using something for free, well, you are likely the product. So go in with your expectations open with these things and have that. So we don't have all the answers yet, but we know what has worked for us and what has not worked for us. What has not worked for us is, regulations that were not consulted, regulations that were too prescriptive without understanding the technology, regulations that put on too much paperwork without any results, and people were too busy doing paperwork than the actual work. And then people start bypassing these, and then you lose the essence, and then that's where the problems start.
Yes, that's correct. Nandakumar sir, your take on accountability part?
So the EU, when they put out a draft regulation before the arrival of ChatGPT, they talked about 9 principles of how the law should be resting on, what the law should be resting on. So it talks of human-centric approach, that the AI is meant for human, serving the humans and not any other kind of direction. Ethical and trustworthy one, which is transparent, accountable. It should be technically robust and safe. It should be abiding by the privacy and data protection regulations. It should have enough transparency, documentation, testing, the whole accountability through verifiability kind of thing. It should keep into mind diversity, non-discrimination, fairness, which is the algorithm bias part that we discussed about. It should consider environmental and societal well-being. So one of the interesting points which keeps coming up is the AI computing requirements at this point itself are significant, and they will continue to go up. If I remember correctly, last I read, the IT use is about 10% of the global energy bill. And if AI were to scale up, it can significantly go up. So that is something which is a factor. Then accountability and governance and human oversight. So those are the 9 principles. And the draft laws, of course, will get discussed. But recently, 7 AI companies actually went to White House and they made some commitments, which the White House was very prompt to publish, saying that now they are on top of the problem. And they made some interesting proposals, which I think are useful to look at for everybody. So there are 3 different categories of commitments that they made. One is ensuring products are safe before introducing them to public. So the aspect of testing comes in security testing, which will be done by independent experts. So that aspect of a company not doing everything by themselves comes in. And then the some of the no-go areas are biosecurity and cybersecurity, where if there are very clear implications, then those are to be guarded against. Then they have committed to sharing information with government, civil society, and academia on managing AI risks. So it's not that company will suddenly come out with something and say, okay, take it or leave it. And most people take it because they don't understand what they're taking it. And so I think that sharing information is what they are committed about, practices about safety, about how safeguards can be bypassed and how they have to be kind of prevented from. Then the second category of commitments is about building systems that put security first. So they have said they will invest significantly into cybersecurity of AI solutions, and especially insider threat safeguards, because insiders know how these things work much better than outsiders. And they are actually committed to release model weights, which is a technical term which talks about what is actually prioritized by the algorithm, only when intended and when security risks have been thoroughly tested. It talks about facilitating third-party discovery. So opening themselves up for scrutiny and reporting of vulnerabilities in the AI systems, which is like currently we have bug bounty and those kind of things. So that will apply to AI systems. And they also talked about earning public trust by watermarking a system. So typically, whatever is created by AI will be watermarked. Now, this will work very well with images and videos. Watermark will be there to see. But what happens to textual information which cannot be watermarked or which can be watermark can be removed if required? So that is something which we'll have to see. Maybe Chirag will have a view on this. They are also talking about publicly reporting the system capabilities, limitations, and appropriate and inappropriate uses. So that will guide the users into using the products carefully. They also talked about prioritizing research on societal risks that AI systems can pose. As I said, individual level risks are okay, or is up to the individual to take them or not. But societal risks can be very harmful if they are not properly researched. So research is committed. And they have also talked about committing AI to basically solving big problems of humanity. So I think this is a good declaration of intent. One has to again see how it works out. But at least this is a good roadmap for others to follow. And I think when it comes to the computing power, the cloud service providers and those who control those significant resources, I think we'll have some role to play here. I'm not sure how it will play out. But there will always be people who will build their own capability to do significant computing, and research bodies, commercial organizations, platforms, they have their own resources which they can deploy on this kind of problem if nobody's watching, etc. But we'll have to see how it goes. So I think these are some of the contours which are emerging, but we'll have to see how it finally goes.
Yes. Thank you for that very nice insight about the global landscape which is being developed. So now we will come to the concluding part. Participants can put up their questions into the question and or chat box. I will read out to the panelists and then we can have answers from them. But before proceeding to the Q&A session, I would like to have a concluding remark from Chirag and Nandakumar sir. So Chirag, over to you.
Yeah, look, a lot of good conversations here. So I think we've covered a fair bit of ground. Look, in concluding, I started by saying, the importance of human critical thinking. I think that's going to be the absolute key when I think from a cybersecurity perspective, is in this world where we live in, where our biases are only being reinforced sometimes because we've lost the art of good debate. I think we all want to listen to only people who agree with us, sadly. And I think people take advantage of these things. So as we think about, our societies, I think the role of critical thinking is going to be key. AI is here to help us. It's a tool. It's not by itself a solution to anything. So I think it's up to us how we use this tool. It has potential to really help us. When I look at an Excel spreadsheet or an Excel tool, I don't worry about what it does. I think how I'm going to use it. Is it to make them accounts? Is it to create a nice register? I don't look at Excel as like, what can it do for me by itself, right? So same thing with AI. We got to think about use cases where it can benefit us. People are, I feel, sometimes caught up in the hype a little bit and are not recognizing everybody wants to do AI. And I asked them, what problem are you solving with AI? And then ask yourselves, is AI the best way to solve this problem? And for the longest time, we talked about automation, right? And in automation, we realized that you can only automate something sensibly when you understand how it actually works. So if there's a process, then it's easier to automate. Otherwise, what are you going to automate? I think with AI too, we got to be smart about that approach. So that's what I urge: is think, reflect before you go and just jump on a bandwagon. It's a tool, and think of it as a tool.
Thank you. Over to you, Nandakumar sir.
Yeah, I agree with Chirag that this, as long as we treat this as a tool, however powerful, and completely under our control, and put the guardrails and let the innovation continue, because I think we also have significant problems staring at us. I mean, in India, of course, we have the whole problem of how many people are still under the poverty line, how we can, how we aspire to improve the per capita income of our people, how we'll take care of water shortages, environmental issues which are going to crop up. All of this will be greatly facilitated by use of AI. And I think Government of India has put out an AI policy. There was a Niti Aayog paper in 2018, which talked about the benefits of AI. And of course, new things have come about. So it probably makes sense for government to commit more resources to it and see how AI benefits can be leveraged by promoting innovation and making sandboxes available, computing facilities available for people who want to try out things, etc. But we need to focus on the benefits in our country, because the regulation problem is actually in elsewhere. As we know, most of the computing infrastructure, the current work happening is elsewhere. We are, I think, talking about building use cases and helping deploy. Our IT companies have been doing great work in IT services. Probably that's what we'll see. But domestically, I think we have great potential to use AI. I mean, I was very impressed by the video from Apple picking. There are so many things which can be done through intelligent automation, use of robotics. It will promote our manufacturing sector also. So I see the economic potential as the more important area to work in. Risks, I think we'll have to keep track of. Already, I think issues like algorithmic biases in lending, etc., are being looked at by various central banks. I presume our central bank is also looking at that. And how to test these algorithms for biases, which are the new applications in various regulated industries, in particular, financial services, lending, payments, financial inclusion. All these areas will benefit with AI infusion and then some oversight. So I think it's exciting, and we'll have to see how things go.
Yes, that's very true. That's why we have termed it as a dynamic. Both of you has explored it in a very nice way, that it's very flexible, and we need to keep a watch how it goes on developing, then we need to take action, and we need not jump on it like Chirag said it, that use it as a tool so that you can harness the potential while balancing your harm which you can suffer from that. So now let's proceed to the question. There are two questions. So the first question is, how should organization approach its disclosure obligation of its AI risk exposure? Like that kind of disclosures which are there in the financial risk, regulatory risk, ESG risk, and cyber risk. So I would like to have Nandakumar sir to answer this question.
I think the disclosures typically are a compliance activity, and it's very important to keep track of compliances as they get rolled out. So far, since we're not seen too much of regulatory activity around AI because the whole sector is nascent. At least I'm not aware of any disclosure requirements as of now. Obviously, like ESG and cyber risk, these requirements will come in. How to put a number to the risk? I mean, obviously, when you are doing risk management, you have to keep assessing the potential to the organization from that risk or damage potential, and how much capital is required to be set aside for that risk. And I think as we see more reporting happening, more measurements will come about in terms of AI incidents and then the damage caused by those. That's what will drive those numbers everywhere. It's like the insurance works by collecting a lot of data and then doing predictions around it. But I see this down the line. I think we'll need to see how regulators everywhere approach this, and disclosures obviously will have to be done. Obviously, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are already offering solutions around AI. Credit assessment is one in banking that I know of, based on data which is in public domain, basically. So a lot of data is collected, it's available. Sometimes the data is collected from the devices themselves, and there are very interesting cases where the app of the lender has to be kept on the phone, and location sharing and everything has to be done. So that analytics and those things are currently under the radar. But they will, I think, become more regulated, I presume, as understanding among the regulators goes up on this, both on privacy side as well as on the regulatory, on the algorithm fairness side, etc. But we'll have to see how regulation comes about and then what disclosures are mandated.
Yeah. The another question is with respect to the regulatory compliance for the power industry and sectoral company with respect to the AI. So do we need it, and what shape it can have for power industry?
So I don't, I mean, I have no much insight into power sector. And the regulation in power sector maybe probably from a competition point of view or consumer protection point of view, but as long as there are no dynamic decisions which are affecting consumers, I presume the risk potentially will be low here, but I'm just speculating here. So I don't know whether Chirag would like to answer that.
Yes, Chirag, your take on this?
Look, I mean, it comes back to, I think it should work within. So I don't see, and this is where we're going to be a bit careful of just going via AI regulations in a specific sector, right? I mean, there are a lot of existing regulations that cover safety and security of our energy infrastructure. So for cybersecurity, for example, here in Australia with Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, there are a fair number of things that were brought about that required organizations to have a risk management posture in place, be able to report incidents, be able to manage appropriately the cyber threats that they face. I would expect something similar, right? I mean, you would expect, and at that level, the principles level, it still follows the same line of thinking as far as I'm concerned, is the organization needs to think about what threats does it anticipate that are added to its entities and to the overall infrastructure aspect, because critical infrastructure, right, over the supply. And then what are the measures that are put in place to address those risks? So those come in once you have bodies of knowledge that can frame and solve the problem. So I think we are now building up those bodies of knowledge quite well, as we see with NIST AI risk management framework. the next step will be a sensible adoption of governance and risk management practices to mitigate any threats and harm to what the core mission is. So I think we've got to be careful about just jumping in and imposing legislation on individual industries and assess if existing legislation can be covered. And this serves as one of the means to enforce those.
Yes, that will be a good approach. Rather than having multiplicity of the regulations, we can assess the visibility of existing regulations, and then if needed to fill the gaps, we can have the patch up kind of a thing. So another question to you, Chirag, that in terms of implementing AI in IDAM, what are the key risk areas that needs to be focused?
Okay, so I'm assuming the questioner meant identity and access management, IDM. So look, I think the example that I gave earlier around access, around user entity behavior analytics, or accessing and assessing user risk, I think AI has a very good role to play to establish good proactive controls when there are breaches and compromise of credentials. The other thing I feel good AI and good analytics can help with is also, the traditional problem we've had of weak credentials or credentials that are used across different areas or credentials that are leaked out and available on the dark web. I think better monitoring and a better proactive threat intelligence to identities would come in handy. So I think those are the two I can think of. The other ones I would say is data loss prevention. Cybersecurity starts with access, right? A lot of cybersecurity is about access management and good access practices about who can access what. So having good AI that can actually, be telling you like who's accessing data where, as opposed to just relying on those parameters and applying that context on it, which is identity analytics. I think that can be really, really useful as we think about identity and access management. And then provisioning of identities. I'm trying to separate out automation, because too often automation also gets dubbed with AI. And sometimes automation is core in itself. So you should automate a lot of these processes, right? On how you provision identities, how you assign access, how you revoke access. But what I'm now talking about in AI is actually the predictive patterns or the analysis pattern, and that can help you. So hopefully you can start embedding some use cases. But with identity and access management, always start with, do you know what your core business applications are? Start there. Understand if they're actually material to your organization. Have you identified those? And then you can actually scope this well. If you try to do this against everything, you're not going to get a buy-in from your organization. Then you risk actually breaking processes as opposed to helping out.
Nandakumar sir, your view on this?
No, I think Chirag has answered it very well. So I would think as more data becomes available, the efficacy of AI becomes that much higher. Also, a lot of security solutions are now software as a service kind of a model where a lot of data federation can happen, and their AI will definitely help. But these are just my bystander thoughts.
Yes. Another question is very interesting, that AI can be developed not only by the organizations, but by the individuals as well. Like Nandakumar sir has said that sitting in a basement, one can develop an AI which can be harmful. So how the individuals can be regulated? Now we discussed about multiple things, how the organizations can be made accountable. So what type of regulations we can expect, or the industry want to have to regulate the individual? So Nandakumar sir.
Yeah, so I will draw on my enforcement experience to say how it works. So typically, the assumption in every society is that people who want to harm others or build something which is meant to harm others are very few. And most people are happy doing rightful activities using rightful tools and techniques. So these are boundary cases or exception handling kind of thing. Now, important thing in this is that whoever is supposed to keep track of this has to have great market surveillance capability. And so obviously somebody who is going to build an AI will also want to propagate it if it has to achieve scale and the impact that the person is hoping for. So that is the first place where you can hear about it, but you can hear about the upstream also, where somebody has invested into these kind of building something like this is consuming a lot of computing resources. There are whistleblowing channels available which make somebody from the team to report that something is wrong here. and so on. The usual mechanism of how harms can be prevented firstly, and secondly, detected early, and how quickly you can respond to them is the prevent, detect, respond mechanism is always very good in dealing with risks. So that's how probably we'll have to look at it, and hope that the mad genius in a garage is not able to harm the entire humanity.
Yes, that's correct. So another question I would like to have answer from both of you, because the question is very interesting one. Currently, the AI is being used for gaming industry, like for playing the games. The other partner is mostly the AI, or manipulating in the stock market. So how we can shape up the regulations for that? So the person wants to have view of both of you.
Look, sorry,
Yeah.
go for it.
No, I thought first I wanted to separate this word gaming. So gaming, the word game is so old and it is used in so many contexts that, you know, a twist here and there makes it either a good or bad activity. So here, I think the way it is used is gaming the stock exchange, which means kind of bypassing the usual process and gaining some unfair advantage, or gaming and manipulating, probably used in the same context, same sense.
Yes.
I wouldn't I wouldn't want to label the gaming industry as something which is undesirable. And it may use AI, but it is using it for something else. But coming back to the manipulation of markets, this is a known problem. And obviously, markets have actually gone into algorithmic trading much earlier than even AI was a fashionable word. And they have their own ways of measuring, monitoring, and intervening these kind of things. Obviously, these kind of activities have also caused destabilization in the markets, as we know, one or two famous cases. So I think it's a known problem, and I don't think we should worry too much about it. Obviously, AI will help many people pick good stocks and all, but as long as the platform is not destabilized and people are using it to benefit from their special knowledge and special expertise, I think that's part of the free market economy. So I don't see there is much to worry about.
Chirag, your view?
No, I agree. I mean, look, it's more about, if you think about gaming, and I'm using that word negatively in terms of gaming systems and gaming markets. Look, yeah, the technical aspects Anand Kumarji covered quite well. Is there have been technical parameters for a while and automated actions. But if you are trying to propagate, disinformation about a company, and I think that's where the critical thinking aspect I was talking about, because that's important, right? Like you could hear a tweet and you could impersonate a tweet, or you could impersonate a message coming from a senior executive of a company. And if you're going to be taking that and making a decision on investment based on that, well, that's a risk. And I think that's where we gotta, as people, just become smart about how we absorb our information, the sources, and being validating that information. But look, I mean, most of the current regulations do cover these things quite well. When it comes to stock markets, financials, it's heavily regulated. So, I mean, these cover the automated parameters. So, at this stage, at least, there is not a new risk you're introducing to it, unless your algorithm is completely different. But these algorithms have been around for a while, and they keep evolving, and they will evolve. It's more about the decisions that you need to make and how you make those decisions around those stocks or investments.
Right. Another question is for a common man, like what are the things or information one should share or not to share while chatting with an AI chatbot?
Don't share anything personal or private, especially with chatbots that are, so they're different type of chatbots, right? Not every chatbot is the same. So if you're talking to a company, like if you're going on a travel website and you're logged in and you are getting some help from that chatbot, that's different than a public chatbot like ChatGPT. So I think that's where be very clear about not entering any sensitive information. Please don't put your we've seen instances of people making mistakes of putting their sensitive company information, and that being at a risk of being leaked. So I think programmers, normal people, just don't put sensitive information on there. Be smart about how you engage with these tools, because until, if it's your own chatbot you create and you own the whole infrastructure, then it's one thing, right? But typically that's what not most common people do. They go on these public platforms. So just like social media, we kept saying, don't say too much and don't reveal too much which you don't want to, because anybody can see it. I think the same aspect, you got to apply that common sense aspect of not putting sensitive information, corporate information, passwords, any critical details on there. Use it to get information and value and keep it generic, at least at this stage, until you know and trust the party who runs it. And then it's a bit of a different conversation. So yeah, I think that's it's important, and also be smart about what this, because one thing we didn't cover too much is hallucinations that these softwares can, these AI chatbots can also do, is they can make up information sometimes. And there's a very popular case in the US where a lawyer essentially got a whole chat GPT and most of it was made up. And it's like, where did you get this? Was all just made up. There was no prior judgments around those lines. So apply that thinking. Just because the chatbot tells you that doesn't make it true. Like just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, right? So read it, assess it, and then use it.
Yes. Nandakumar sir, suggestions from your side?
I agree, as Chirag said earlier, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. The disclaimer is very much there in the ChatGPT when you enroll, that information will be used to improve the algorithm further, or whatever. As the call center say, maybe call will be recorded and can be used for quality purposes. So that disclaimer is there. I have used a disposable email ID for enrolling into this, so hopefully that helps. As you know, on iCloud, you can create these disposable email IDs. But what happens is, the IPs I'm coming from, the kind of questions I'm asking, somebody can really figure out. Most of the people will do vanity searches first, right? Like Google, from time to time, you put your own name and say, where is my name coming up? And the ChatGPT knows that you are, if you're doing a vanity search there, then who you are. So anyway, I think the resistance is futile at some point of time, but one has to be careful.
Right. So another person is asking that what will be the future when we are talking about chatbot versus human intelligence?
It's an interesting one, right? It's prediction business we're getting into now, but the power that human beings have today is the power of our core values of empathy, of kindness, of analysis, of critical thinking. The bots don't have it yet, and I think that is our advantage. We create things, we actually inform them. I think that will keep us ahead. But what is at risk, and where bots actually excel beyond us, is they don't need to sleep, they don't need to rest, they don't get tired, they don't need vacations. So they have that natural inherent advantage there, right? So for repetitive tasks, for things which require copy paste tasks or very routine tasks that is very well established, those are where bots will excel. And that's where the topic of job loss comes in, and those big topic comes in. Routine repetitive tasks are the highest risk, where humans can be quote unquote replaced. But areas where we come in is areas where we can actually add that value and that critical thinking and that judgment calls that we can make as humans, where we make a lot of judgment calls in our daily lives, where there is no, not a blue, like a book or a black or a white, so many gray things, and we make judgment value-based calls. I think that's where the bots can't do that yet. And I think that's where our intelligence comes to bear.
Nandakumar sir, your suggestions?
So I think this question is a little artificial at this point of time. But if you see use of technology actually amplifies the existing inequalities among the humans themselves. So if you see all the research is being done by big companies, and it's all about very big scale kind of stuff. And there is a talk of job losses, which are actually at the lower income level. And then the logical point coming up is the universal basic income kind of thing. When AI and robots are going to do everything, then humans have nothing to do. So everybody will get some income, and probably they can use their time for recreation or creativity or whatever. But I think the bigger problem that we see, and pandemic has really, so everything which is a impactful change, whether it is positive or negative, benefits people who are in control of dealing with the change, right? So so big corporations, governments have gained much more power in last few years, and they will continue to do so in future. So I think we should worry more about human disparities than machine versus human, because by the time that problem comes, it would be too late to think about it anyway, because the way things move in this field, and AGI is, everybody is saying it's far distance away. Some people say technology is not capable of sentience. Why should it have malicious intentions, etc., etc. But the whole accumulation of power that can happen and the kind of changes which it can bring about can really be harmful. But I think we are going into too much of speculation, and if we worry too much about the future, then our present is affected. I think we should focus on current human societal problems and how AI can help solve those.
And the last question for the session is a kind of a repetitive one, but I would like to explore it more. Like, what currently people are doing, that they are feeding the information to AI bot and they are seeking answers from it. So where actually we are going wrong? You have given the caution note that we should not share this, we should not share that. But how to shape up? Can we have a kind of a guidelines for the same, that this should be put into, this should be not put into? It can be a societal binding. So what is your experience and your personal views about it? Chirag?
Look, so I think we covered it from the personal data, the risk aspect of it, right? Far too often, and I'll get a bit philosophical because we're closing, far too often in life, is the quality of questions we ask that dictate our lives, right? As opposed to anything else. So I think the same thing goes with this bots, is the kind of questions we ask are important. And that's where you're seeing a whole field now emerge, and people can look up prompt engineering on writing smart prompts to make your life more effective. So I don't think we are going wrong necessarily in engaging with the bots, because we're all trying to figure this out, right? We're all trying, we have a new technology at our disposal. We're all learning and we are growing as we go. So I don't think I would say anything wrong, except of course, putting in sensitive data and putting your corporate request and corporate information at stake. That's a problem. So I would urge people to, think about the vanity searches were covered earlier. Let's not do these things for that, but rather have some creativity around what do you want to solve as a problem in your life, right? Like day-to-day activities actually AI does really well. Hey, if you want to go out and create, you struggle with, I want to create a food plan for myself, right? And what do I cook this whole week to stay in shape and, eat this right food? It'll give you that list, but as you could ask the right questions. And I feel so, I don't think there's anything wrong in how we're engaging, at least what I feel. I think it's more about what type of questions we want to get, and how we wanted to solve the problems that we face, and be curious, go out and explore. ChatGPT does one. There are so many others that can create presentations, that can write things and create designs. So I would encourage people to be curious and actually go out and explore them, as opposed to getting caught up with all the hype around the whole thing.
Yes. Nandakumar sir, your view?
No, I completely agree with Chirag on being curious and skeptical. Not to accept whatever is being put out by the oracle. And sometimes it is useful to kind of have two separate windows open, one for Bard, one for ChatGPT, and then see what answer seems better. And obviously challenge the answers given, saying that this is not correct, give me citations, or then it will come back. Sometimes it hallucinates and then comes back with an apology. So it will become better, but I think we have to improve our ability to make decisions. And this is something which I think is severely lacking in the society now. Because of the way the brain works, we always take shortcuts, assumptions, and traditional ways of making up your mind. And every time challenging requires effort, and also the ability to then resolve your own doubts about things. That is something which probably is an educational agenda for all children to be taught like that. But at our age and at our station in life, we should just be more skeptical and ask more questions and keep improving those questions as we go along.
Yes. And another question has propped up with respect to the same, like you said that there are multiple things to explore, be curious. So the person has asked, what is the best chatbot as per your experience, ChatGPT, Bard, or any other?
Oh, that's a
Chirag?
dangerous game to go by, right? So I'm gonna say they all have their pros and cons. I think I enjoy all of them. I try and I experiment with them, and they all have their pros and cons. Is where ChatGPT had the first mover advantage in a sense of being available to people first, and I think people got. And the first thing that comes to you, get more familiar with it. So I try not my familiarity to guide my bias. So I started using that first, and then started using some others. And I feel they all have a lot of good potential in what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, it's come down to what I want to do. There are certain chatbots that do better at a specific task. So ChatGPT does really well with general tasks. I find like it's really good because Bard has some other advantages which I like when I want to get into certain depth. So look, there's no one versus the other. They all are pretty good, and you got to find what's best for you. Use them all. Figure out what works for you.
Nandakumar sir, your
No, absolutely.
experience?
I think till they are free, you can experiment as much as with them till they choke you. But at some point of time, we'll get used to it. And like now we started paying for email. We'll start paying for the chatbots also. But till they're free, then we should use all of them.
Yes, that's very correct. So thank you, panelists, for having this a very nice intellectual journey of exploring the dynamics of regulating AI. We know that this is very uncharted territory right now. We cannot predict. We are not a speculative AI. We are a human beings. So we believe on ourselves, our own actions, and that is what is needed. That is the need of the day, that rather than being governed by the AI, we need to have the governance mechanism set to regulate the AI. So that is the need of the day. But as you have rightly said, we can have a self-regulatory mechanism, which will actually create a balance for the sustainable and coexistence living of both AI and human intelligence together. So there should not be a versus kind of, but there should be a friendship between both of these intelligence mechanisms, and then only we can survive with these developments. So that is what the key takeaway from the session. So thank you, Chirag. Thank you, Nandakumar sir, for taking out your time and navigating us through this very difficult topic, because I know a lot of material is there, but to articulate the thoughts and present it, that's very difficult in terms of exploring the AI. So thank you, sir. Thank you for taking out the time. I thank all the audience for patiently listening to our speakers and attending this session. We are going to have more sessions like this. So be in touch with us. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Great pleasure to be here.